Hello and welcome to day 4 of our Smogon Classic previews, reviewing SoulWind's RBY game against Finchinator in the, I believe, quarterfinals. We have a Starmie against an Executor lead. Now, this Starmie is Psychic and Thunderbolt, or even Surf and Thunderbolt, which are both relatively common sets nowadays. This is an excellent matchup for the Executor, but as we can see, it's Blizzard, which is actually very dangerous because, of course, Starmie is even faster than Tauros, so he crits even more than Tauros. And so you can see that if this Blizzard that crits, the Executor will already basically be out of commission. On top of that, you have to add, of course, the freeze chance, but more importantly, the sleep miss chance. And to some extent, this is quite the unlikely scenario, but the instant wake chance, or maybe if not instant in 2 turns or 3 turns, even still, a quick wake would also be very bad for the Executor, and Starmie can actually just stay in on egg because she doesn't have to fear, basically anything. Mega Drain, sure, but if he Mega Drains your sleeping Starmie, you just say, okay, this Executor has Mega Drain, now I know. You'll take 30% on a Pokemon that's asleep anyways, which is just fine. So, overall, Starmie against Executor, definitely Starmie favored, especially since it has Blizzard. It's basically the reason you don't run Egg-Lead that often, is because it matches up so poorly against Blizzard Starmie. So Finchinator took a bit of a matchup gamble, because of course Executor lead also loses quite hard to Jinx. So there was a minor gamble from Finchinator here, and unfortunately for him, it really does not pay off. At least the second Blizzard doesn't crit either, but he doesn't miss the second Sleep Powder. So all of a sudden, we're already looking at an Executor that cannot stay in here, and to get any value, it will need to basically find a switchback on Chansey or Snorlax. And no other situation. But there are basically no attacks that this Executor can directly switch into anymore. So to get his Sleep Powder and the explosions off, he will literally need to switch back on a slower Pokemon. There is no other scenario. And so Finchinator already has a very uphill battle. We do see that SoulWind goes for an Executor switch here, which is actually quite smart, because it is very unlikely for Finchinator to just sack this Aggie completely, There is... If you basically just give up the Executor here, you significantly cut your chances of actually surviving this game. And once you've given up on the idea of sleeping the Starmie in a 1v1, which you kinda have to at that stage, there is no real reason not to go Chansey. To actually, defend against Starmie's hits. So to go Executor here, very, very smart switchback by SoulWind, predicting the Chansey and correctly getting to Sleep Powder here for free. Now, Finchinator offers up his Starmie. This is sort of a curious decision, in that you have an Executor that is already nearly dead. Now, of course, it is predictions, because it is very possible for SoulWind's Executor to just click an attacking move and kill off this Aggie, if it comes in. But it is notable that by giving up the Starmie as well, Finchinator really puts himself in a bad position, because now he basically needs to get value out of this Executor, and if he doesn't, his game is pretty much over already. So to give up Starmie here is a bold move, perhaps the correct one, because of course you don't want to risk the game on a Psychic, but there is, you can make the argument that going Executor and risking the game on a Psychic at this stage is already worth it, because of how badly your first turns have gone. And of course, even after you let Executor take the sleep, this is still not good for you, because you are 5 Pokemon against 6. Because you will not get another sleep back, because this Executor is the Soul Sleeper on Finchinator's team. And so, from Finch's point of view, maybe he just said, if I don't get value out of this Executor, I'm never coming back into this game anyway. So let's just gamble on the idea that I will find that free turn to Sleep Powder and then explode, and let's see if I can make that happen and come back. And so he Sleep Sucks Starmie instead. Now he burns a turn, which is perfectly reasonable. That is also another way you can get back into the game when you are down sleep, which Finchinator is here, as I just explained. It's very, very difficult for him to ever sleep, really. So since he is down sleep, it is reasonable to start risking those wakes. And Stormy on Executor isn't even that risky, but of course you could say Taurus can come in here and cause some damage. So it is still a relatively bold move to stay in with Stormy there, but it pays off. And then the Taurus comes in at that turn, after turn 6, because this Stormy, it is very rare to see Blizzard Thunderbolt as a set for leads, because then you don't pressure things like Chansey, things like Snorlax, all of the early game Pokemon that you kinda want to be able to beat with Stormy lead. If you don't run a stab move, it's kind of difficult to deal with them. And so Blizzard Thunderbolt is very rare, so it is reasonable to guess at this stage that this is Blizzard Psychic, which is a very standard Stormy set. And so that would still be walled by the Sleeping Stormy. So here the Taurus comes in, but Finchinator maybe still worried about Thunderbolt, goes to Chansey, which actually ends up working out for him, because of course it also covers the Taurus switchback. So a good play from him. Now, this was a very difficult turn for Finch, because of course you want to Thunder Wave the Taurus, but you also don't want to give SoulWind a sleep block, because you're still desperately hanging on to the slim hopes of actually ever sleeping something with Aggie, and if you Thunder Wave this Stormy, that's just never going to happen. However, it seems from this turn, after this fully paralyzed, after this second fully paralyzed, seems from this turn, okay, Finchinator just says, wait a second, I can't actually deal with Stormy if I don't paralyze it. So I just have to Thunder Wave it and start forcing it out in some ways. So when you consider that he had to do this immediately after sleep sucking Stormy, it really does bring into question his decision to not sleep suck Executor a little more. Because now, with the context that he was going to be forced to Thunder Wave a Stormy anyway, this 18% Executor has even less value. And so, of course, it was very unfortunate what happened, both the matchup and the fact that it didn't actually pan out for him whatsoever. It's basically one of the worst case scenarios that can happen did happen to Finch here, so it was a very difficult position to play. But I do believe that watching these first 11 turns of the game, Finchinator should have really tried to sleep sack the Aggie instead of the Stormy. And then once the Stormy Blizzard Psychic revealed, of course, you can stop it with your own, and you can stop it with the Chansey, so it is much more easier to handle. And of course, you are playing a full Pokemon down, but the Asleep Executor can still absorb the explosion from SoulWind's, and basically you have the Starmie, you have the Chansey. It's not completely unreasonable to expect that from these Pokemon, if you play well, if you get a few reads right, you can find a way to come back. Of course, it is an uphill battle no matter what. So now we see a few turns of sweet nothing. Starmie trying to Psychic the Chansey out. Does manage to do so. Finchinator goes Starmie. Burst a turn, still no wake. Snorlax comes in. Body Slam. Reflect. Body Slam again. What will the fourth move be on the Snorlax? It's Size Beam. And it freezes on the first attempt. So this is the break that Finchinator needed to try and come back in this game. This is how you make up the number disadvantage. Because now your left Starmie is mirrored by the frozen Snorlax, but you still have to find a way to get a full Pokemon of value out of this 18% Executor, and that way will most likely be trying to switch back it and then explode it on the Starmie perhaps, or anything that isn't the Snorlax really should work. So that is the game plan now. This game all of a sudden with that first time freeze, of course very fortunate, but you know, if Finchinator had to do it already. Very fortunate, but now it puts him sort of back in the game. He still has work to do, definitely, but he's back in the game. Now, this Chansey comes in on a body slam, and Chansey, probably with the expectation of either scouting for counter or going to Aggie on a switchback, decides to seismic toss. However, Finchinator just says, no, this is fine, I'll body slam and try to crit you, and if it doesn't happen, I just slow down. Which is also a reasonable play, because again, Finchinator cannot, is in a position where he needs either some absurd outplay or some luck. And it seems that he's choosing to go for the luck way, which is apparently correct, because SoulWind did try to predict the absurd outplay, the Executor on soft boiled. Now, there are a few more turns here where SoulWind just does proceed to soft boiled a lot, and perhaps Finchinator really should have gone Executor on one of these, because there were many subsequent turns where he had a chance to. However, it doesn't happen, and Chansey does finally manage to get a reflect up safely. Finchinator just says, okay, slow down, I will rest, this is fine. And it is, but SoulWind does now get to pressure this lax a bunch, because of course it will have to rest periodically whenever the seismic toss damage racks up. So, there's one. SoulWind decides to switch out directly while the Snorlax isn't sleeping yet, which is perhaps a bold play, because with Thunderwave you can just keep going through rest and soft boiled for a bit, until you see a turn where, Snorlax gets multiple full paras in a row and he has to rest by force. And then you can switch in Executor on something that isn't a body slam. You can switch out Executor on a rest. However, that does expose you to body slam crits. And SoulWinds decides that the HP on his Executor is not really worth it, which perhaps is really not the wrong idea, because this paralyzed chance is going to be very difficult to break for Executor anyway. So we will probably see an explosion from this Aggie aimed at the Chansey. And so, even if Executor takes some damage, it will probably ultimately result in the same final idea of exploding Chansey eventually. So accelerating towards that point of the game is not necessarily a bad thing. Now, SoulWind gets a bit unfortunate, and the body slam does paralyze it. Goes for the Psychic, Chansey comes into wall as expected. Goes for the Psychic again. Once more, Finchinator had his chances to go Executor or Starmie on an explosion here. But instead he just chooses to stay in, as he did earlier on. And SoulWind does try to call out the switch to Aggie, but he just finds Chansey staying in. And does get 2 drops in a row, which is definitely fortunate for him. That crit literally does nothing. But yeah, you do see the Chansey coming out. This crit is actually not irrelevant, because it means that if this Starmie tries to wake up, it will have even less turns than it would otherwise. So it's not an irrelevant crit there. Now, Finchinator goes like a Zam trying to catch Tauros on the sleeping Starmie, and he does. So now he has a free turn with this like a Zam, but he does reveal that his last mon is like a Zam here. Which is, okay, first of all, it opens up to the question, why was Starmie the second, not Zam? Because we said earlier that by the time the sleep powder came out, no, actually no, it could have been Blaze Bolt by that time still. But it is a bit rare to see a Blaze Bolt Starmie nowadays in the lead position. So maybe you should have taken a gamble on just saying, this is Blizzard Psychic and my T-Bolt Starmie can beat it. Now, of course, I don't know for a fact that this Starmie is T-Bolt, but judging from the fact that he has Chansey's Reflect and he has no other ice moves in this team, I would think that this is just Blitz Bolt. But, I mean, I don't know. Well, I guess he has the Ice Beam on Snorlax, but still, he has no electric moves. Basically, he has nothing for type coverage. Not that type coverage is very important in RBY, but it is to some degree good to have moves to hit things like Starmies, so Thunderbolts, and things like Rhydons, so Blizzards. So that is what I would guess, that this is Blitzbolt. So if that is the case, then I do think it was a mistake to Sleep Sack the Starmie instead of the Alakazam, because the Starmie was very much better in the matchup. Well, assuming SoulWind's Starmie was not Thunderbolt, of course, which you couldn't know for sure, but you could guess because it is a rare set, Blitzbolt in the lead position. But it is sort of niche knowledge. I'm not surprised that someone like Finch, who only has, a marginal knowledge of RBY, is not as experienced as others in the tier. It doesn't surprise me that he wouldn't make that kind of guess so early on. This is definitely a position that is easier to analyze and to comment on after the game as well. It is a position that when you are in a game, it is difficult to think about everything and make those guesses, make those predictions, because just the game is so open-ended. Of course, now that I have all the time in the world and a full picture, it is much easier for me to say, should have done this, should have done that. But of course, actually doing it in the game is difficult, so I'm not... this critique of Finchinator's decisions is not meant to be insulting in any way. Of course, he's playing a good game of RBY with some inaccuracies that they always happen. There are very rare perfect games in RBY. Perfect play is very difficult to achieve. So anyway, back to the game. Finchinator does get himself a nice free turn with a switchback of Alakazam on Tauros, but the problem is that this paralyzed Starmie still walls it. Perhaps this was a good occasion to go switch back to Executor, because it's either the Executor that's coming in, which is paralyzed, or the Starmie, which is also paralyzed, or the Chansey. So, three things that are all slower than the Aggie. Tauros is obviously never staying in against the Alakazam, never in a million years. There is no scenario ever under which the Tauros stays in. And so, what I would have done probably in Finch's position is just switch back the Executor here and try to explode it. Of course, you have to play a mind game because SoulWind has an Explosion Absorb right there with the Frozen Snorlax. But at this stage, you're basically never going to get rid of that Frozen Snorlax, and you will need at some point of the game to play that mind game. So there is no real reason to delay it and try to do it later, because this Frozen Snorlax has basically no scenario under which it is actually forced to be sacked. And so this Alakazam Psychic, it achieves very little. I don't really like it. He does get a Psychic drop, but doesn't even pursue the idea of forcing the Starmie out or trying to kill it through fully paralyzing. So, I mean, it's reasonable to switch Alakazam out there, because you don't want it to get T-waved, but I think he had to be a bit more proactive in that position, because he's still down with this basically unusable Executor, and I do think he badly needs to extract some value out of it. But instead, what happens is SoulWind kind of loses his mind and thinks, what's a good chancy answer? A Pokemon that does learn Thunder Wave, let me remind you. You know what's a good chancy answer? Tauros. It isn't. It isn't, and this play is wild. It's absolutely insane. I don't understand why he went Tauros, but he just goes Tauros, clicks Body Slam, and Finchinator does not click Thunder Wave. I don't understand. Yeah, I don't know why he clicked Reflect. You can just Thunder Wave this and then maybe sack the Starmie, since your chance is paralyzed and sleep blocks anyway. And you go Snorlax and it's perfectly fine, and you've paralyzed your opponent's Tauros. And you've lost nothing. Instead, you Reflect, gives him a chance to maybe, make up for his very dangerous mistake, switch out. But no, SoulWind doesn't care for switching out. He stays in, fishes for a crit, does not get it, but does get a fully paralyzed. Goes again, Finch soft boils, absolutely refuses to Thunderwave the Tauros. Soft boils again refuses to Thunderwave. And then finally Seismic tosses on a turn where SoulWind's finally decides to switch out. And the Seismic toss is actually reasonable because, of course, now that it's at full health with Reflect, there is no chance in hell that this Tauros stays in. But with how much SoulWind exposed it to a Thunderwave, you even had to consider the possibility that he was willing to stay in and just let this get T-Wid for no reason. This is... Now, I know it sounds like I'm very, critical of their play. Of course I understand that in an actual game it is difficult to make every play right, but I do think that this risks taken with your Tauros from a winning position, they're just not worth the price at all. You are already ahead, you don't need to risk Thunder Waves on this at all. You can break this Chansey with your own Starmie, you have 11 Psychic PPV, you can force it out a million times, and you can eventually explode it with your Executor. It's completely fine, you don't need to force it down, to try to force it down so early. And from Finchinator, like, I don't know why when your opponent offers you to paralyze Tauros, you don't take it. Because paralyzing Tauros is basically getting a free kill. It's basically as good as getting a freeze. It's absolutely insane how good paralyzing Tauros is. And maybe that is something that people who don't have a lot of RBY experience don't see. But it is really, really important. Because Tauros really relies on being able to go first and threaten that 45% hit with Hyper Beam, that sort of massive attack. And so if it's lower and he has to take 40% himself before firing, all of a sudden he's much less carrier. And so yeah, that whole sequence I think was a huge blunder on both sides. And of course it's understandable, I've made plenty of blunders myself, but for analysis sake I feel like I have to say what I think. Otherwise what is the point of making these videos? This was just, I don't know, I don't understand it. So good Seismic toss from Finches and predicting the Starmie switching. He now needs to keep mounting pressure on the Starmie, and again, try to get value out of this Executor eventually. Few fully paralyzes, recover, Seismic toss, fully paralyzed Seismic toss, recover FP, S toss, done. Now Executor comes in, at last, on a recover, and straight back out. SoulWind offers an Executor on the explosion, which is like, I guess it's fair, but not really, cause like, what is the point of going Aggie here? Like, are you predicting a switch out? Is that what his prediction was? Did they predict that Finch just went Aggie and then would go back? Cause, if this Executor explodes and takes this Aggie down, you lose an explosion. You can't explode this Chansey anymore. And all of a sudden, you really do start needing to sacrifice your Tauros to take this Chansey down, because you're running out of ways to break it, because Starmie PPAs are going down, and yeah, explosion from this Eggy was one of the main tools in SoulWind's arsenal to take down this Chansey cleanly, and so I am surprised that he was willing to offer it. I do understand not going lax, obviously, because it's a play that just doesn't work if your opponent clicks Psychic or something, does anything other than explosion. So it is a risky play to go lax there, but I don't understand offering Executor as the explosion target. Though I guess it is marginally. Is it marginally better than offering Starmie though? I don't know, it doesn't feel like it's good. It feels like if you offer Starmie, then later on, Starmie was at 100, so it's not like it even died. So if Starmie ate the explosion there, Later on, you could go get it back on Chansey and just get it back up, because this Chansey obviously is paralyzed, is lower. You had chances to get your Starmie back. You don't have chances to get this Psyche back if you explode it, and your path ahead gets a lot worse if Finchinator clicks Explosion here. So it's a very tricky situation with a lot of possible options. I don't like going Executor. I do like going Snorlax, but unfortunately, with the fact that SoulWind went Executor, it does actually work out. I understand going Snorlax though, because if your opponent goes Snorlax, then you get back in the game. I guess Executor makes sense as a sort of middle ground play where you're both good against Snorlax and you're good against Explosion, but Starmie staying in and clicking Psychic does the exact same. Or clicking Blizzard if Psychic doesn't do that 18%, I don't remember the exact range. So yeah, I don't know, I don't like this Executor play. Now, Finchinator graciously decides to offer his Chansey, which, I mean, there's a Malakazam here. I understand the Stun Spore is a move, but at this stage I think you have to realize that this Chansey is the only thing holding your team together, because after this goes down, Chansey, the enemy Chansey sort of just goes in. Chansey and Starmie together, absolutely force Thunder Wave on Alakazam, kill Executor, kill Snorlax, kill Tauros. They win if this Chansey goes down. And so I think you had to just risk, if it's Stun Spore, maybe I lose. Or maybe, I pray that he misses, That's the sort of play you have to make in this position, because now that you offer him his Chansey, if SoulWind clicks Explosion here, the game basically ends. But it seems like SoulWind still thinks you can get more value out of this Psyche. I don't understand how. Finchinator does predict the explosion. Actually, no, I take it back. This was brilliant from Finch. Try to bait the explosion, see if it's there. Like, this is a pattern where I would 100% explode, because very, very few players go Chansey first and then back to Starmie to try to catch the explosion immediately. A lot of players just go, sure, I'll throw a Seismic Toss on the first Psychic, because I'm at full health, there is no... and he's still very healthy, so he can afford a few turns before exploding. That is a play that many players do. They just go Chance and they think, he's high on HP, he won't explode now. But so that's why I personally do that explosion a lot, and I think it's a very good play in a lot of situations. And so the fact that the Finchinator saw that and baited that with that exact line, I think it's a brilliant idea. And unfortunately for him, it does not work out. He does get his Starmie on SoulWind's Starmie, which gives him another chance to fish a Wake. But at this stage, if you try to fish a Wake and you don't get it, and your opponent goes Tauros, the game ends. Well, I guess it doesn't. I guess you just suck the Starmie, but you do lose a sack, which makes the game difficult. And so Finchinator once again gets it right, goes Tauros. A very interesting sequence of turns and sequence of switches, and I think I like the ideas on Finchinator's side every time. But SoulWind does get a lot of reads correctly and is in a position that is already commanding. So ultimately, the game does not go in Finch's favor, despite a few good ideas from his side for sure. So now this time the Tauros does switch out, does not need a Thunder Wave. We go to Starmie and Chansey again, skip ahead a few turns. Chansey gets dropped. Tauros comes back in again, offering a Tauros for, you can see that he got a critical, but questionable gain, because if this doesn't crit, you just get T-waved, and then I guess like a Zam comes in, which isn't super solid. I guess actually you just sack Starmie, then go Zam, or go even Lax, and this chance is still healthy if this Body Slam, this exact Body Slam turn 75 doesn't crit. This chance is still healthy, and he can still wall Starmie and Egg. And so, lucky for SoulWind, he does get the critical, and he does drop the Chansey. And his Starmie and his Chansey are all set to take over the game now. There isn't like a Zam in the way, which is actually troublesome now that Tauros isn't there to what's the word I'm looking for? Take advantage of a paralyzed Alakazam. Now that Tauros isn't here, well, it's here, but it's paralyzed, so it doesn't beat paralyzed Alakazam anymore. Now that Tauros is so crippled, the Alakazam is actually a significant roadblock. So, again, this time Finch does recognize that the Thunder Wave is the better play immediately. I don't understand why he didn't the first time. That could have maybe saved him. But, you know, he's given SoulWind enough chances to body slam. SoulWind has taken them and has actually got a crit. Well, this is the end game we're in right now. Tauros comes in. Finally, Finchinator gets a turn where he's not forced to play defensive. He's not forced to try and switch back manically to find value of this Executor. Finally gets a situation where you can just go Tauros and force body slam damage on SoulWind's team. And he even gets a crit, but the Tauros doesn't fully paralyze, so it's not terrible for SoulWind. Now, Tauros body slams again, correctly predicting that SoulWind was going to try to absorb an Hyper Beam. Now, this Starmie, it's really dangerous, but there is an Alakazam here that you can use. And there is even an Executor that you can use. Well, I guess... No, okay, this Starmie is clicking Thunder Wave on this turn. So, this Snorlax doesn't really win. It just forces Starmie to Psychic, but Starmie is happy to click Psychic there. So you have two lines. One is going Starmie and pivoting there, but probably not very good. Two is just accepting your paralysis on Alakazam. And 3 is hoping for a full paralysis for Executor. 4 is staying in with Tauros and hoping for a full paralysis as well, which is probably, actually, hoping for an FP with Aggie is probably just not the play, because an FP with Tauros is more likely and more rewarding. So yeah, you have 3 ideas here. Go Starmie on the T-Wave, see what happens. Go Alakazam on the T-Wave and just concede it, and stay in on Tauros. Same with Tauros on the T-Wave and just concede that. And Finchinator selects to stay in with Tauros. Now, this is a very complex endgame, so I can't actually with full confidence say which of the 3 options was better here. It is definitely reasonable to just body slam again and see what happens and hope that either a crit max roll, though I think Starmie may already have been out of range of crit max roll, but I'm not sure. So either that or a fully paralyzed happens and you somehow get bailed. But I do think generally the safer idea was going Alakazam, because the Aggie is paralyzed, so you still beat it. The Tauros is paralyzed, and you still beat it. The Chansey, it's not paralyzed, but you can T-Wave it and then beat it. And Starmie, of course, it can drop you, but your Seismic Tosses do more damage than his attacks. So I think Alakazam was the better idea there. It is understandable to keep it fresh in hopes of beating the 6th mon with it. But I don't know. I think letting Alakazam T-Wave and keeping Tauros for the last mon was going to be a better line of play than giving up Tauros now and hoping for Alakazam to miraculously solo. So Finchinator does not get the FP luck, and now he continues fishing, but it's just not working out. Does get an FP now, which means Snorlax can fire a body slam, except he doesn't. This game is a mess, except he does. This game is still a mess, but Snorlax here is not even a Hyper Beam, so he just loses straight up. Now Executor finally comes in, and you're like, finally this Executor can get value and explode. He double edges, fishing on a fully paralyzed, or I guess even a crit, which is actually a good play here even. But unfortunately it doesn't work. And now, will this Executor finally explode 85 turns in? Nope. He's out of there. Correctly, may I add. I've been calling for this Executor to explode since turn 5. It's been 80 turns and it's not happened, and I'm not even that upset. I think it's... I think I would have exploded it much earlier, at basically the first chance available, but it was very reasonable to keep it until now all the way, so that is kind of funny. But yeah, finally Alakazam comes in. I do question switching out, because at this stage, both Starmie and Executor don't really like switching into Alakazam, because Psychic Crit, Seismic Toss, and a fully paralyzed or two, it can be nasty. Tauros is obviously not an answer anymore. So I do think Finch could have guessed that Chansey was coming in and try to land a paralysis on it already, or maybe a psychic damage at least. Just something other than switching out of the Snorlax, because I do think with Starmie the way it is, it's more likely for Alakazam to do progress than Tauros, because this Tauros is paralyzed already, so Starmie can just come in, and unless it gets crit or FPs multiple times, is Starmie probably just completely fine here against this Tauros. This is an endgame with 2 paralyzed Tauroses that is really something you don't see often nowadays, by the way. It used to be very commonplace before the mechanics changes, when body slams could paralyze other Tauroses. But nowadays, to see 2 paralyzed Tauruses, both alive at the same time, that's a rare sight. So anyway, Tauros against Chansey. Finch is just desperately looking for something at this stage. Of course, Chansey, it's really, you have no Seismic Toss switch-ins that are actually good, and so to go Tauros on it, I guess you're just trying to take it down. But I really insist that Alakazam Psychic Drops was going to be the better idea here. Doesn't materialize. The Chansey drops, but it's at the cost of Tauros' full health bar, so now Zapdos can come in, claims it. Alakazam comes in. SoulWind pivots to Eggy. Explodes it, but finds the Starmie switch. And now goes Starmie again. Now, Finchinator had a mind game here where he, obviously if he went Executor on Zapdos he lost. But going Alakazam on Starmie also loses. Because Starmie just clicks Thunder Wave, and if it hits Alakazam, then Zapdos wins. And if it hits Executor, then Starmie can just Blizzard, and if it hits Executor, basically you've given him a free T-Wave, and it's just completely losing anyway. So Starmie on Zam is winning for SoulWind. Eggy on Starmie is actually fine for Finch, surprisingly, because obviously SoulWind has to respect the explosion, but he is out of Psychic Answers, and so he can go Snorlax, but on the Psychic and sack it. Actually, no, I guess that doesn't work, because no matter what, even if Finch gets the Eggy on Starmie, SoulWind just sacks Snorlax and then goes Zapdos. And well, basically he just sacks Snorlax, and then if Finch can do whatever, but if his Executor is on the field, eventually Zapdos comes in and wins. And if his Alakazam is on the field, eventually Starmie comes in and T-Waves and wins. So I guess there is a line under which you I guess your hope here is trying to kill the Snorlax, and then just hope that you can go hard Alakazam on the Drill Peck, and somehow survive with a healthy dosage of Yellow Magic and luck. But this is very, very much lost for Finchinator already. I apologize about saying that there is a 50-50. There is no 50-50 here. SoulWind just wins. Unless he gets terribly unlucky, which he doesn't. Thunder Wave lands. It would take a miracle for Zapdos to not win. A crit happens, but it's not quite enough, because Drill Peck, Thunder Wave. Now, curiously here, SoulWind just Drill Pecks instead of clicking Agility, which does make me wonder if maybe he just doesn't have Agility. But yeah, we see Finchinator going for his only out at this point, which is trying to somehow beat the Zapdos with Alakazam 1v1, but eventually he FPs one time too many. Zapdos never FPs, and SoulWind wins. The only chance there was Alakazam lucking, but it just didn't happen. So overall, What to say about this game? I think there were a lot of inaccurate plays, but they all made sense. I just disagreed. I thought for every play that made sense that they made, which were many of them, a lot of the plays they made sense. I just had another play in mind that I think was ever so slightly better. And so I can't say with full confidence that these players played poorly. Because other than the Toros on Chansey sequence, which is admittedly pretty bad from both of them, that one I'm confident about. But everything else they've done, I've disagreed with a lot of plays, but they all made sense, and I can't, confidently say this is wrong or this is right, because there were so many mind games throughout this game. So many things that it's difficult to say this is objectively a misplay, because there is a world in which those plays made sense. Even when I said the Eggy explosion that I said that SoulWind tried to that turn where Eggy could explode, and SoulWind went his own Eggy on it, and I said I didn't like it. I can't actually with full confidence say that that's a misplay, because SoulWind found a Snorlax switchback of all things, and it actually worked for him. So I'm not sure if that's what he had in mind, but it literally just worked, and I cannot say that a play that worked is incorrect. And so that is the thing with a lot of this very tight, very technical RBY games with, a lot of Starmie shenanigans, a lot of we saw yesterday a very quick game with a lot of explosions, not very complicated scenarios, just 1-for-1 trades all over with explosion. When you have very few explosions and very many recovers, the game is a lot more open. There are a lot of more options in your hands, in both players' hands, and so it does become more difficult to say exactly what is right and what is wrong. But I do hopefully, I hope that I managed to deliver, interesting insight on what I think was a good play and what I think was not good play. I definitely think that both of these players showed that they're not exactly RBY mains, despite SoulWind being obviously very familiar with the tier and won cup and all of that. I do think the fact that he went Tauros there shows that he's not really not a top 1 RBY at the moment. Essentially, he's very good, but I think a very high level RBY does not risk his Tauros there, where he has still so many options in Starmie and Executor to work around the Chansey still. But other than that, and other than Finchinator, not Thunder Waving when SoulWind also graciously offered his Tauros, I think everything else was very, very good. Obviously, I said I disagreed with a lot of things, but there is disagreement and then there is objective misplay. I think in this game I have a lot of disagreement and not much of objective misplay, and so a good spectacle for sure. Even if I had a lot to criticize on the individual turn-by-turn decisions, I very much enjoyed this game. Very high level play, even if it's not obviously there's that sequence in the middle that spoils it, but the game overall I think was good except for that. So definitely a good show from both. And this is definitely play that would crush anyone who is not top 18 Smogon Classic level. So there is no question about that. Those players, they may not be absolutely peak perfection, but they are still damn good. So yeah, that's what I think about this game. Many things I disagreed with as you heard, but definitely a good show. I feel like I'm repeating myself and not really developing a conclusion. So sorry for making you sit through this last minute. Thank you so much for watching, and goodbye. See you tomorrow for the semifinals.